Glutes neglected, which is interesting to market this as I finally got my glutes to grow the program. No hat today because I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to bring the hats in intermittently. So maybe not every video, just every now and then, maybe every other video or so I might throw a cheeky hat in there. And obviously at the end of the year I will donate all of those hats to charity so they don't go to waste. How I finally got my glutes to grow the program, Hanna Öberg. Hannah, big fan of her stuff, you know I'm a big fan of her stuff. I figure, you know what, I've got a small bum. Why don't I learn something about how to grow said small bum and pretend I actually train it consistently when I clearly do not. But before we obviously crack on with the video, very quickly, if at any point throughout this entire video you decide you like the video, then please let me know you like the video by liking the video and maybe even by clicking the button down below to subscribe to the channel and perhaps even tickling the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. This is from her new guide. I say new guide, this is like 2 months ago, but the guide's out now and this is one of her leg days. I believe she said she's got 3 leg days in this program. I fully back 3 leg days, especially if you have a weakness around that area. So if a lower body muscle is particularly weak for you or is a muscle group that you particularly want to develop, like your glutes, quads perhaps, then you can certainly include 3 leg days if you so wish, because again it gives you more opportunities to grow via essentially accumulating greater weekly volume if you're able to. Just make sure your recovery metrics are in order, so you're sleeping enough, eating enough, drinking enough, so you can obviously recover from the additional volume. Just know that other muscle groups like your upper body may take more of a back seat, although they will still obviously progress. They may not be the priority, which is obviously why you have glute specific programs, leg specific programs, upper body specific programs, etc., to channel a lot of that emphasis into those particular areas if they're areas you wish to develop. So starting with the adductor, you definitely can do so if you so wish. The adductor muscles, obviously being the inner thigh muscles, are typically very heavily worked when you're doing very deep leg presses, very deep squats, things like that. So you may not need to train them directly, but if you feel they're a weakness for you, you can certainly include them. It's interesting that the next move, and considering this is meant to be like a glute program, is a hack squat, which again is going to be very much a quad dominant movement. The hack squat very much works at quads in their lengthened position and is a fantastic quad movement. Big fan. Hack squat, Smith machine squat. So the implementation of this reverse band here takes some tension away from the lengthened position at the bottom and actually shifts it more towards the mid position. So for example, doing a hack squat without a band is going to be typically more lengthened position. A hack squat with a band is typically more mid position. And what that means is essentially it changes where the peak tension is. Without the band, the peak tension will be at the bottom when she is there. That's where most tension would be. But obviously she's added the band in to help her get out of the hole. So now the most tension is going to be around that midpoint when the band tension has alleviated and the weight on the machine is kind of taking over. If I had to choose between a banded hack squat and a regular hack squat, I would choose a regular one, typically because the quads tend to grow better in their lengthened position. So lengthened position dominant movements are a good time. What I would say though is you could maybe include this variation as well as another lengthened position movement. So you could perhaps do like a back squat, a pendulum squat, something like that, and then treat the hack squat almost like a leg press to an extent, because the leg press again is a very mid position dominant movement. So you could almost like swap that out for a banded hack squat. Therefore you got another mid position dominant movement taking over. For the quad specifically, I wouldn't do this banded hack squat with a quad bias leg press, because again, you've now got 2 mid position movements and that kind of tickles into the realm of exercise redundancy, which is where you're essentially choosing 2 exercises that essentially do the same thing, both of which targeting the quads in their mid position. Whereas like I said, if you did a hack squat without a band and then a regular leg press, you would then look at lengthened and mid, therefore avoiding that redundancy. This is actually something we speak about in the upcoming guides, July 17th, upper and glute dominant guides coming out. That speaks all about exercise redundancy, what that means, how to avoid it, things like that. A big thing here, regardless of whether it's banded or not, depth. Nail the depth. So you see Hannah's lifting in her socks. You can certainly do so if you so wish. What I would typically say, if you can, elevated heels. So like lifting shoes allows a bit more knee flexion, which means the knees can travel further, which means the quads can lengthen further, therefore maybe making the movement slightly better for quad development. Hack squat is probably not a movement I would include for glutes myself, but maybe that's not why she's included it, who knows. Where you choose holding is really up to you. I typically like holding it up high, as long as you're able to get a good depth, as long as your hips aren't lifting, as long as you're able to lock into the machine. I fully support it, fully back it. But again, that really depends on what hack squat you have access to. The Atlantis hack squat, quite a heavy duty one. The more vertical the hack squat, the harder it's typically going to be. The more horizontal it is, the easier it's typically going to be. A few things are linked below in the description. You've got the TFNL coaching application form in which you can apply to work with either myself, Ryder or Beth on a one-to-one basis where we will be your coach and help coach you towards whatever goals you may have. You've also got the links for the group coaching for the gym and home workouts in which I structure programs for you to follow either on your own or as a group in the community via the Train Heroic app or website where you can kind of talk to me, send some bits and bobs in there, ask questions, track your workouts, talk to other people, see what's going on with them and have input on the next training blocks going forward. Not only is there a gym and a home workout group or team, whatever you want to call it, there's also a Train With Me team that's going to be launching on the 3rd where you can train exactly like I am. So I will be doing the training with you, which is going to be exciting. And if none of those appeal, you've obviously got access to the TFNL guides. So you've got the growth guide and the home workout handbook, which again are fitness resources with lots of information about how to effectively train for your goals, whatever they may be, in addition to 30 weeks of programming or more in each of them. So you essentially have over half a year of training planned for you if you want it. And obviously on July 17th, you've got an upper body specific guide coming out and a glute specific guide coming out as well. So that's all bloody exciting. I would actually lean this towards being more of a quad bias leg press because the feet aren't particularly high, which means there's probably going to be a bit more knee flexion. Again, if you wanted this to be glute bias, you typically raise the feet a bit higher, so high narrow stance for more glute bias. And again, because she's gone from a mid position dominant quad movement to a mid position dominant quad movement, this could tickle into the realm of exercise redundancy, where if she brought her feet up and made it more of a glute movement in the lengthened position, so being high stance leg press, it would have much more of a place personally. Now, again, just my opinion. Is that something everyone needs to worry about? Probably not. At the end of the day, it's really if you're looking at getting the most out of your training, you want to try and target muscles in different positions, to avoid that redundancy. Is it going to make or break your program? Absolutely not. Is it going to stop you from seeing results? Absolutely not. It's just a consideration if you want to maybe get a few extra % out of your programming. The big thing to note here is the intensity. Look how slow those reps are going. Even though those reps are really slow, she probably still has more in the tank. Point proven, more in the tank. Again, that's more of like a final rep sort of thing. I would still probably try another one, as she has done, laughing. The last drop at the end could definitely control that eccentric a bit further, but exercise intensity is going to be key. Regardless of what you do, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, regardless of whether you're choosing the worst movements or the best movements, exercise intensity and training intensity is going to be key. Because you could choose the best movements in the world, but if you don't train very hard, you're not going to see the results you could see versus if you trained a lot harder. And it is typically really hard to take leg training to failure. Maybe it's a confidence thing, maybe a safety thing, maybe something along those lines, but training legs to failure is bloody hard. And it never gets easier, but you just get better at tolerating it. So now we're going on to a leg extension. Again, very quad dominant. Removing the band from a hack squat, having a hack squat in which quads are being worked in their lengthened position, and a leg press where it's mid position, and then a leg extension shortened position, ticks all 3 boxes of quad training, and that's very much how I actually structure one of my leg days, is lengthened, mid, shortened. From a quad training perspective, if the band were removed, genuinely bloody nailed it. Fantastic. From a glute training perspective, we're lacking a lot of glute work here. From a quad training perspective, with the consideration of the band, it would have been better if there was no band. But yeah, the leg extension, if I could only choose one movement to train my quads, it could potentially be the leg extension, because it's one of the few movements that actually trains a rec fem, because it's one of the muscles of the quads, and it's the only muscle of the quads that crosses at the hips, which means when you're doing like squat variations, as you shorten the quads at the knees, you're lengthening them at the hips. The rec fem is trained, therefore it's one of the few movements that actually trains all 4 muscles of the quads relatively effectively. Whereas if you were to only choose a squat pattern, the rec fem might be neglected, or probably would actually be neglected, to be honest. What you could do here, again, whether you lean forward or lean back, it's completely up to you. I think I mentioned this before. There's the argument that if you lean back, you're training the rec fem in its more lengthened position, and muscles do typically respond best to being trained in their more lengthened position. Therefore, it could yield better results for hypertrophy. The rec fem is often neglected in its shortened position, so leaning forward could then train in the shortened position, which is something it may not have experienced much of. But if I had to choose, I'd probably lean back personally. I think what we're going to say is this, is hamstrings are neglected, but again, there are 3 leg days. They're probably being trained effectively and adequately elsewhere. Glutes neglected, which is interesting to market this as I finally got my glutes to grow the program. I know she's speaking about her glute training and what she's done differently, and this is obviously the quad dominant day. She's probably putting glutes on their own on another day and pairing glutes and hamstrings together on another day, which is actually probably how I would do it. But again, the titling is a bit confusing in that sense. From a quad training perspective, it would have been pretty bang on if the band was removed from the hack squat. I think the issue is when you're doing it like that, you've essentially got, like I said, obviously you spoke about exercise redundancy and neglecting the lengthened position, which is really what you need to be prioritizing with the quads, is that lengthened position. But you've also got the consideration of doing 3 quad movements back to back. It would probably be better to split them somehow by chucking a hamstring movement or a glute movement in the middle of them, just to again top up a bit of volume, which might have been taken away from somewhere else, and to also give the quads a bit of a break, because if you go quad, 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 fatigue might be kicking in quite hard. At least if you throw in a glute or a hamstring movement in the middle, it gives them some chance to recover maybe, and that can negatively impact later exercise performance. So like the leg extensions could be negatively impacted. But again, it really is up to her. That's not must by any means. Like, that's actually how I train. So one of my leg days, which you will see if you sign up to the Train Heroic program launching on the 3rd of July, which is Train Like Me, one of the leg days will have 3 quad movements back to back to back, being a lengthened, a mid, and a shortened, with some hamstrings in there earlier on as well. But that's just how I train them, because quads aren't a massive weakness for me at all. Actually, quads are actually one of my strong points, so I don't need to be too careful with it. Hamstrings are more of a weakness, so it makes more sense to put the hamstrings first and maybe neglect the quads slightly afterwards. But again, it very much depends on recovery, volume, etc, etc. The program itself, I think, is fine. I'm curious to see what the actual thing looks like. I'm curious to see how she split 3 leg days, because I believe in the glute guide we've got coming out on the 17th, we have 3 leg days where it does allow you to train all the muscles adequately and split in a very easy to recover from manner over the course of the week and over the course of those 3 leg days. There is no right or wrong behind it. It really is just preference and how you choose to organize your sessions, and how it's structured is just how myself and Ryder chose to organize ours. But Hannah's obviously kind of actually adopted a similar approach, but not quite the same, which again is nothing right or wrong about that. It's purely preference. Again, like I said in the last video, I believe the last video, one of the last videos, I am ahead with videos, so comment questions are going to be a bit behind, because again, I'm prepping for my America trip coming up in the next few weeks. Lots of exciting things are coming, and hopefully I'm going to film some of the America trip so I can provide some slightly different content to you to almost document the trip while I'm out there, because like I said, I will be coaching at the Powerlifting World Championships in Louisiana, before then traveling to Texas, before then traveling to LA. All going to be very exciting. Big fan of Hannah, big fan of her work. Just because we don't necessarily align on everything doesn't mean either one is right or wrong. It's purely preference, and at the end of the day, if it's working for you, then I respect it. Just know that I might do things slightly differently, and it's worth trying both to see which one you prefer and then going from there. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my probably very fast speaking and lack of breathing, and thank you for tolerating the video.